Hi, everybody. Welcome. My name is Julie Geisinger, and I'm the campaign director for Oil and Water Don't Mix. On behalf of the Line 5 organizing team, thank you for joining us this evening for our July campaign briefing. Before we begin, let's look at tonight's agenda. We'll start with some campaign updates, then dive into this evening's topic, a cautionary tale, what's happening on the ground with the Line 5 reroute in Wisconsin. We'll be joined by our special guest, Jadine Sonoda from Sierra Club, Wisconsin. From the recent spill during construction to clashes with Enbridge's security team, these stories are a preview of what's to come if the tunnel project moves forward. After, we'll open it up for some Q&A and finish with a brief action. Now let's get started. Okay. Many of you participated in the recent public commenting period for a water discharge permit Enbridge is seeking for renewal on for the proposed Line 5 tunnel construction. It's the NIPD's permit, the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permit. So this would authorize Enbridge to discharge up to 7 million gallons per day of industrial construction wastewater into Lake Michigan. The commenting period closed June 30th, and we had well over 23,000 comments submitted by coalition partners, plus good turnout at the public hearing on June 18th, which actually lasted for over 6 hours. For those that did participate, we just wanted to thank you. A decision on the specific permit is expected later this year. The big decision on the tunnel is actually expected tomorrow, so all eyes are on that. We've been told the decision by EGLE, which is the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy, will announce their permit decision Wednesday. This is the Wetlands and Great Lakes Submerged Land Act's permits. Enbridge needs to proceed with the tunnel project. It will either be an approval, a denial, or a conditional permit. Enbridge also needs a federal permit from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. They will announce their record of decision once the EGLE permit decision is made, anywhere from 1 to 30 days after. The Army Corps permit is contingent on the EGLE decision. So as you can see, this will be a pivotal week one way or another. And finally, one of the state permits for the tunnel previously approved by the Michigan Public Service Commission, was challenged in 2 separate cases in front of the Michigan Supreme Court back in March. The state's highest court is expected to rule on both of these cases before their session ends at the end of this month. Stay tuned for the latest updates on these decisions. As soon as they're in, we'll be posting them on our social media pages. Now, before I turn it over to Jadine, we wanted to share out a video. It's actually from last year, but still very relevant, of an incident that took place in LA when a major tunnel project under construction collapsed and trapped 31 workers 400 feet below the ground. The project has remained kind of stalled since. It hasn't reopened. And while this is a sanitation tunnel, so a little bit different, there are many parallels to the proposed Great Lakes tunnel, including the use of a tunnel boring machine deep underground. This story had a happy ending, although as you're going to see in a minute from the first responder that they pointed out, they got lucky. So let's play that clip.
Ground, more than 30 workers trapped some 5 miles from the entrance to the tunnel. That scene playing out in LA County. It took hours, but then the remarkable moment, they got the workers out. They were lifted up by a crane right there. 31 in all. You can see them walking out unharmed. Firefighters rushing to the scene, prepared for what could have been a mass casualty event. The first word from officials, we were lucky. Tonight, ABC's Kate Whitworth with the harrowing moments here. Those 31 workers trapped 400 feet down.
Tonight, this massive sanitation construction site now closed after a frightening tunnel collapse in Los Angeles County left more than 24 workers trapped 400 feet beneath the ground.
There was a location that squeezed the tunnel and forced it to partially collapse.
Calls coming in just before 8 p.m. Wednesday at an industrial area outside of Long Beach.
The tunnel lining failed approximately 5 to 6 miles in.
The men operating this tunnel boring machine at the time, and a pile of debris some 14 feet high blocking them from the tunnel's entrance. Hundreds of first responders racing to the scene overnight. Less than 2 hours later, the workers able to free themselves and walk some 5 miles to reach rescuers.
The workers had to climb through debris. They had to make themselves out through, and then rescuers actually came to them to assist them out.
Finally emerging in groups of 8, lifted to safety inside these metal yellow baskets hoisted by a crane.
Those on the ground level here heard a boom, and it shook the ground. There's now a complete work stoppage here, and behind that white Dragados building, you can see the entrance to the tunnel. They had completed 6 of the 7 planned miles of tunnel, which runs underneath residential communities, parks, and other public right-of-ways.
And tonight, those rescued workers back home and safe.
Fortunately, none of them suffered any major medical issues or injuries as well, too, so that's part of the miracle, too.
And David, ground monitoring systems here detecting no other problems so far, but the sanitation district telling me that tunnel has one way in and one way out. And had those workers not been able to scramble over that debris field, this could have been an entirely different scenario. David?
No question about that. We're just glad they're okay tonight, and what a rescue effort. Kana, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So as you can see, obviously a little bit different situation, but still very similar, and to see some of those visuals of what that entrance into the tunnel area looks like in the boring machine. Lots of parallels there. And then transitioning over to Jadine, there's obviously a lot happening there on the ground that kind of plays warning to what could happen here. So Jadine, turning it over to you for an update on the reroute in Wisconsin.
Thanks, Julie, and hi, everybody. I'm Jadine, and I work for the Sierra Club chapter in Wisconsin, so thanks for having me today. Yeah, that was quite terrifying to watch, and I think indicative of, yeah, just the threats that come with these types of construction. So I am glad to be here today to tell you a little bit more about what's happening with the reroute in Wisconsin. I am sad that I'm here today to talk to you about it because I wish that neither of our states was dealing with this kind of behavior and these kinds of proposals from Enbridge. Yeah, so I'm going to share a little bit more about what has been going on in Wisconsin. And I think I'll give like a very, very brief background just in case people aren't very familiar with what's going on before I get into some of the details. And so similar to the tunnel proposal that you all have been fighting against for a very long time, Enbridge has proposed another project in Wisconsin as well. It's called the Line 5 Reroute Project, and it is meant to reroute Line 5 around the Bad River Reservation, which is in northern Wisconsin. Right now, Line 5 is currently operating on the reservation and is operating there illegally and has been doing so since 2013. And Bad River is currently in court with Enbridge over that illegal operation. And they have made it very clear that they want Line 5 to be removed from their reservation and from their watershed. And despite that demand and that clarity, Enbridge has come forward with this proposal to reroute the pipeline around the reservation, which not only doesn't remove it from the watershed, but puts the entire reservation at risk since the waters in the area run north into Lake Superior. And so construction around the reservation basically cuts off the reservation with the pipeline, and so any potential construction damages or an oil spill would be flowing north through that land to the lake. And similar to you all, we've also been fighting this project for many years in regulatory processes, and that is still continuing. So unfortunately, our state Department of Natural Resources did grant permits for this reroute in late 2024. And since then, both Bad River and a number of different environmental groups, including Sierra Club, have been a part of a legal challenge to those permits. And that's still ongoing, actually. But while that is happening, Enbridge is able to start some of their construction on the reroute. And so that's what I'm here to talk a little bit more about today. Sorry, Bill, I keep kind of going back and forth, but I think you can pull the slides up again. And basically, Enbridge is able to do a lot of their work, and that has included a wide range of activities. And so we have some photos in here today to show you a little bit more about what that looks like. And all of this is really thanks to a lot of local folks in the community who have been monitoring what Enbridge has been doing. And I say this in particular because our lessons from Enbridge's Line 3 construction project in Minnesota were that if we're not watching what's happening, we might not know that there's damage occurring. And so it's really important that this is happening and that we have people on the ground who are observing the work that Enbridge is doing. And so what you can see here is one of the most concerning types of construction that has happened so far. So if people are not familiar with a frack out, this is something that can happen during a particular drilling process called horizontal directional drilling. And this is a fairly common process, but when used to do pipeline construction, can often be really damaging. Basically, it is a way to tunnel underneath a wetland or a waterway without digging a hole and making a trench. And to do that, you need to use drilling fluid that creates a hole and then you pull the pipeline back through it. Um, and as you are creating that hole, you use a drilling fluid or a slurry, and that slurry follows the path of least resistance. And the companies and contractors' hope is that it stays within the drill route, but who knows what it will encounter underground, and if there's a little crack in the soil or rocks or anything that disrupts that pathway, the fluid can basically shoot off in a different direction. And so it might get stuck underground. It might surface elsewhere in a creek or in a wetland or in forested area, which is what we see happening here. And the reason why this is so concerning is because we don't know what's actually in this drilling fluid. Enbridge and their contractors like to talk about it being mostly water and bentonite clay. And while that may largely be true, there are also proprietary ingredients and they're trade secrets. And so we don't know what they include. But we have heard that they include unapproved additives, which is really concerning, especially because there's a lot of concern and worry that some of these additives include PFAS, and worries about what that contamination will do locally and how long it will remain in the area. And in addition to that, even though clay is clay, in the slurry, if it's released into a waterway, that can smother animal life in the water and on the bed of the waterway, and can disrupt spawning and things like that. And so there's a lot of concern about both immediate and longer term impacts as frackouts happen. And I want to give this background because this is something that we are really worried is going to become much more common as construction continues. And I say that because in line 3 construction, which I had referenced before, Enbridge, who was using the same contractor in Minnesota as they're using currently in Wisconsin, had frackouts at 67% of their drilling locations, which is kind of astounding and really concerning. And this is something that we have been raising to regulators in Wisconsin and talking about for many years. And as construction has started, we have already seen that this frackout happened at Vaughn Creek, as you could see in the photos before. And actually, I just heard about 15 minutes before coming on this call, there were 2 other frackouts reported. And that speaks, I think, to the frequency which we're seeing these damages happen. And there's very little information available right now, and a little bit of uncertainty about what information will ultimately be available. So transparency is a big issue, and the longer term impact of these frackouts is really scary as well. So I wanted to lift that up as like one of the pieces that is happening to us in Wisconsin right now. And I think part of the hope is that this is a cautionary tale that never comes true in Michigan, and hopefully we can stop the bulk of construction in Wisconsin as well. But I feel like it's important to know what the risks are and what could be coming so that we can be lifting that up and talking about it publicly, and making sure people understand that what's happening isn't out of the ordinary. It's something that has happened in construction before and will continue to happen unless we're able to stop these projects and be a lot more thoughtful about what kinds of infrastructure we're allowing to continue. And if we can go to the slide after, I think I can talk a little bit more about some of the other issues that we've seen. So even though, well, I was going to say only the reroute is just over 40 miles long. And in that span, there's a lot of very sensitive areas and a lot of potential for damages. So I had mentioned the frack outs, but some other cautionary tales are kind of highlighted here. I think I'll start in the top right and I'll kind of go around in a circle. But the first thing that we started to see was really significant tree clearing. And this photo in the top right corner shows kind of what that looks like. And there are many, many photos and videos that look very similar to this. You can see just complete clear-cut routes through forest. And that was starting back in, I believe, February. And so you can really tell as the trees have leafed out what kind of impact has been made in disrupting the forests in the area. There are a lot of really, really big old trees that have been down, and it's really sad to see driving around. One of the major highways uh, intersects with some of the Line 5 reroute right-of-way, and you can just see the clear cutting. And for a long time, Enbridge was leaving the trees just kind of like splayed on the ground, and we're coming back to do removal later. And so there is just trees everywhere lying cut, which was very devastating to see. And of course, really disruptive to any of the wildlife who was living in that area. Um, and along with this clear cutting, we've also seen a lot of signage, which might seem like not a very big deal. But this is one of the big sticking points that has come up pretty often. So in the bottom right corner, you can see that there's a sign. It's a little bit hard to read, but it says no trespassing, occupant Enbridge. And I believe underneath it, it basically says violators will be prosecuted. So in Wisconsin, in 2019, I believe, there's a felony trespass bill that was passed and signed into law, which is really, really concerning. It basically makes it a felony to be on be on critical energy infrastructure land, including the pipeline, so this reroute. And this is a big deal because a felony is a huge consequence of just being on the right of way. And this pipeline crosses public paths and hiking trails and things like that. And more than just that, tribal members who hold treaty rights in this area are concerned that these signs in the felony trespass bill basically create a chilling effect on their ability to exercise their rights to hunt, fish, gather, etc. And sovereignty and tribal rights are such a key part of all of this work. And I feel like the felony trespass bill and these signs really highlight that and uplift the impact that this construction is having locally. One of the big concerns as well with this pipeline construction, in addition to other types of infrastructure projects, is man camps and the threat that they pose to local communities. Sexual violence is a really, really big deal, and there have been connections with other similar fossil fuel infrastructure projects in the past where you have a large population of workers, mostly men who are coming to an area for a short period of time. And so you can see here, this is one of the places where people have been staying. Some of the workers have been staying. Um, and this lot was very recently constructed. There are some earlier photos from a couple months ago that show these lots basically being created in these pads for these trailers being laid down. And not just this, there's been a really big impact to the local housing market. I have heard anecdotally that people have been kicked out of the places that they're renting because Enbridge will pay more for their workers to stay there, that people are renting out plots of their land for trailers to be brought in. And so there is pretty significant concern about potential sexual violence that might come with increased worker traffic in the area, and also the impact just on the local housing market and people's abilities to have a place to live. Um, and I don't think that there's another slide unless I'm remembering incorrectly. Uh,
No, there's.
Okay, so one of the other things that I just wanted to mention was as all of this is playing out, as I had mentioned, there are folks locally who have been doing a lot of monitoring work, which I said was extremely critical, and a lot of what we know, I don't think we would know without those people. Um, and I think it's also a scary thing to be doing. Enbridge has like a private security group that they're working with, and they have also worked through the Wisconsin Counties Association to set up an agreement with some of the local sheriffs basically to reimburse policing activity, which is really upsetting and concerning because basically they're creating their own private policing force. I guess that's not quite accurate, but um, if money is flowing in to support work time and any kinds of supplies that might like be necessary, that's really concerning because it puts people who are water protectors and protesters and really just monitoring in the area at greater risk. And I've also heard anecdotally about experiences some of these folks have had with the security forces or even with local law enforcement where they're being approached on public land or elsewhere and being harassed or they're made to feel unsafe in the work that they're doing. So I wanted to raise that as another concern that has come up and I think will probably continue to be a problem throughout construction time. And it's not just individuals who are doing this monitoring work. There have also been tourists who are being turned around on roads and being said, hey, you can't be here because of construction. So the impact is most intense for the local community, of course, and also impacting everybody who is in the area right now. So that was a little doom and gloom and depressing, and I hope that it can spark some energy and excitement to prevent similar work happening elsewhere. And yeah, I guess I look forward to working with you all on how we can eventually shut down Line 5, which is the ultimate goal, and basically prevent more damage and harm before it can happen. So thanks for having me.
Thank you, JD. Doom and gloom or not, it's important information and certainly disheartening to hear what's happening there. And unfortunately, a preview of what's likely to come in the Straits of Mackinac if the permits are approved. And how do you even monitor what's happening when it's hundreds of feet underwater? It's a scary thought. Okay, now we'll open it up for some Q&A, and then after that, we'll get into tonight's action. But if you have some questions, you can either raise your hand or put it in the chat. And I know Sam has been kind of monitoring the chat. Sam, are there any questions that you want to lift up before we go to any raised hands?
I think we can go to raised hands and we'll review, but go ahead, Bill.
I just have a real quick note. One thing that we didn't mention when we showed the video, the ABC News video about that tunnel last year, they have still not reached the breach. So it's been a year. There was a press release that was put out on July 1st, and it says underground inspections are closing in on the area where the breach happened at the Clearwater Runnel project under Western Avenue in San Pedro. The update on the Clean Water Tunnel project came last month from the LA County Sanitation District, whose staff and project contractors are working with Cal OSHA to move forward with phased repairs and re-entry into the underground passageway that occurred a year ago. So this was under dry land, and conversely, they're trying to do the same. I mean, it's uncanny how similar this tunnel is to the one they're proposing under the Straits. It's 21 feet across, using a tunnel boring machine, going way deep underground, and they're they can't even get it fixed up on dry land. Just think what would happen at the Straits of Mackinac. So that's and this is something that all the experts that we've spoken to have all warned against. Yeah. So take it away, Sam.
Yeah, I wanted to lift up a question earlier on the chat and see if someone wanted to speak to it. The question was, what is happening on the Canadian side of this issue? From Murphy.
Well, I know there is a lot of Canadians that are in support of shutting down Line 5 and protecting the water as well. And Bill might be able to speak to this more because I know that he was digging into some of the articles that were coming out. But I mean, they know that in Canada, there's been some announcements about doing some new pipelines that would go across the country. Although I don't know that any of those have actually have the funding to do so. And there's, question whether it's economically viable since I don't necessarily know that there's the demand for such a pipeline. Bill, do you have any more insight on that?
No, I don't.
Okay. Nicole, I see your hand is raised in the chat.
Yeah, I was pretty dismayed to hear about the felonies associated and that it's even, kind of encompassing right of ways. Was that just sort of a surprise? Like, was there any indication prior, while they were trying to get all these permissions for the reroute, that was part of what the plan was going to be to, restrict access to public lands that way and make it a felony?
This was definitely a concern that was raised throughout the permitting process. And I would also say there was a lot of pushback when this bill was introduced and went through the legislative process in the first place. And yeah, mostly to say it's been known, and I think that people have had on their mind the question of how this would impact Line 5 construction, Line 5 reroute construction if we got there. And since the law has been pretty new, there hasn't been a lot of testing as to kind of the limits of it. And so there's a little bit of gray area around how it will be implemented, which I think makes it a little bit scarier as well, given that this is one of the first really big tests. And Enbridge and others have been supportive of this law. So I think that just speaks to their nefariousness and wanting
just
to have
kind of
control.
who's in service to one another.
Mhm.
See another good question in the chat. Is an underwater tunnel collapse? If it was an underwater tunnel collapse, would those men have drowned? It's most definitely a possibility. There was a tunnel in 1971 under construction under Lake Huron near Port Huron, and 22 tunnel workers were killed during a collapse. So it's definitely very, it's a dangerous project to begin with, but yeah, anything could go wrong. And that news piece said, they got lucky then. But water or not, if the ground hundreds of feet below you collapses on you, very dangerous.
And this tunnel is not watertight. It is going to have to be pumped out for 99 years. It's the water is going to infiltrate. Even when you look at the photos from this other sanitation tunnel, there's water in the ground of that, and there's no, that's on dry land. So this is going to be constantly a problem for them. And imagine if the power goes out and the tunnel floods, what happens then? Nobody knows.
Yeah, and not easy to get to people when they're underground like that.
Yep.
Sam, do you see any other questions in the chat? I'm trying to flip through it.
Yes. Well, the one that just came through is please update where the pipeline stands with the Michigan legislature and the governor. If anyone wants to summarize that. And then I have my hand on the earlier chat I want to try to find.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you may have missed the updates at the beginning, but right now it's all in the hands of the permitting agencies, and we'll have the state permit decision is expected tomorrow. And then the Michigan Supreme Court's ruling on the Michigan Public Service Commission permits appeal, it will be announced before the end of July. So as far as that goes, those are the pieces that if they get those approved, and then the Army Corps issues their permit, they are clear to start the construction. There's not a whole lot the legislator can do right now. There is a federal court case. The Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals is reviewing a case right now for preemption, which basically the ruling that came out last December was that the federal pipeline laws supersede state law, and so the state doesn't have the authority to shut it down, to revoke the easement. They don't, so that's being appealed, but that's far off from now. That the oral arguments won't be heard in that case until November, December at the earliest. So a decision is far off. So if Enbridge gets the permits, construction will likely start pretty soon after. So court cases, no matter which way the permits go, you can imagine there will probably be litigation, but that most likely, unless there's a stay, construction starts. So it's a scary time right now because everything we've been fighting for is kind of coming to a head. Yeah, what the heck is going on with Whitmer? Mike, that is the $1 million question here. Real disappointing. She's been completely silent.
There was a much earlier question. There's been a very active chat, which is great, about asking if there's any way to do a multi-state Zoom with Indigenous leaders who were involved with the back end. I don't know if anyone has more information on that or wants to share.
I don't have any information on that, but I mean, I would imagine that we'll be all convening next week for an oil and water don't mix steering committee meeting to discuss our strategy going forward once there's a decision. And I know that a lot of the other groups that have been fighting this and tribal partners will be doing the same. And I mean, there are a lot of other environmental groups and tribes and individuals fighting fights across the country on this. So
well, if you strike out with context, let me know, because I do have some native context in the Bakken, having worked in Billings, Montana. So could reach out to those people of who they think would be authoritative, but I don't want to overstep with good native leadership in Michigan that probably has context too.
Okay, yeah, I will definitely follow up with you if needed on that.
But that is either that or a First Nations person from Canada who can talk authoritatively about what man camps have meant for Indigenous peoples. The Bakken in Canada have been just travesties. So
I appreciate you lifting that up. Emily, I see your hand is up. I know that you've had some stuff in the chat. Do you still have questions?
Well, I did have a suggestion as a way to proceed forward. I mean, I talked with someone whom I met who was somewhat involved with this case. They suggested considering writing a letter to the rating agencies that have made ratings for Enbridge. As I gather, they have an unqualified audit, and the rating agencies can access the provisions for environmental hazards, and Enbridge needs to have a qualified audit because of insufficient to qualify for anything because of insufficient provisioning for her environmental damages, and a qualified audit would damage their rating and increase the cost of capital, and thus it would be cheaper than an environmental waste site. I mean, I imagine a lot of that is legal, but that's a possible suggestion going forward anyway. What do you all think of that?
Yeah, it's definitely something to keep in mind.
Yeah, Emily, I could put that in the chat, and I'm glad you lifted that up. And just for time's sake, I'm going to get to I think the last question that we saw in the chat was, do we have a strategy to delay or stop construction if the permits are issued? And I know, at least from the Oil and Water Don't Mix Coalition, as Julie mentioned, there's a big strategy meeting coming up. But Julie, do you want to say anything more about that, or Bill?
Yeah, I mean, that's going to come down to the legal teams that are really at the heart of the battle. And so I think that, none of us are lawyers here, so we can't really speak to that other than, there are legal tactics that will, I'm sure, be explored. similar to like what JD was saying, there's, in Wisconsin,
How
like
did you raise your hand?
there were days when they were trying to like do the construction over some of the water crossings. So you can go to court for that. But I mean, I think that that's something that's beyond my scope to really truly get into like the legal bolts. But I mean, I think all of that is going to be explored post decision. Okay. If there's no other questions, we'll move on for a brief action, and then we'll wrap things up. So Bill is going to show. Bill is famous. He is a TikTok star. He's going to show you one of our latest reels that's out that we're hoping that you can uplift. It's gotten a lot of traction, and it's also another important message of what could happen when construction starts, like lots of devastation. So I'll let Bill play that, and I'll drop these links in the chat if you want to share them.
Yeah, this is a TikTok that's right now. We just posted it Saturday, and it's already has 200,000 views on TikTok and almost 40,000 on Meta. So it's definitely worth grabbing the link and trying to share it along and make sure that more people see it. Here we go. Every tree you're looking at right now is scheduled to die for a Canadian oil company. Before you scroll, there's still time to stop it. Stick around. This is the forest at the Straits of Mackinac. Enbridge wants to clear cut this land to build a tunnel for the Line 5 crude oil pipeline. Their own federal review says construction wipes out 19 acres of vegetation, over 5 acres of this forest, and more than 4 acres of wetlands. 287 of these trees are roost trees for the northern long-eared bat and the tricolor bat, both federally endangered. They're cutting down the homes of endangered species to move Canadian oil from Canada to Canada. And here's the part that nobody's doing the math on. Construction takes at least 6 years. They haven't even started, so the earliest this tunnel opens is around 2033, and they want to run oil through it for 99 years. Do the math. That's crude oil flowing through the Great Lakes into the 2130s. Meanwhile, in the real world, solar and wind are already the cheapest electricity in history. EV sales break records every year. Battery costs have dropped about 90% since this tunnel was first proposed. Okay, not quite yet, but you get the idea. Because this project has been about to start since 2018. Here's the big picture. I can't get out of my head. 10 years from now, they cut the ribbon on this tunnel, everybody claps, then they all get in their electric vehicles and drive home. That's the project. A multi-billion-dollar fossil fuel tunnel built for a world that's already leaving fossil fuels behind. It's like laying transatlantic telegraph cable in the age of the smartphone. I can already hear the comments, but we need the oil. Enbridge's own experts testified in federal court that shutting down Line 5 raises gas prices in Michigan and the Midwest by a half-a cent per gallon. Half a cent. That's what this forest is being traded for. And every barrel through that tunnel gets burned. That's the climate emergency part. We're in a decade where every credible scientist says stop building fossil fuel infrastructure, and Michigan is being asked to host brand new oil infrastructure designed to outlive everyone watching this video. The hopeful part is that this fight is not over. Regulators still have decisions to make, and public pressure can work. Link in our profile, it takes 2 minutes. Do it for these trees, because every tree you're looking at right now is scheduled to die for a Canadian oil company. Before you scroll...
All right. So yeah, if you can share that on your socials, we would love that. And then Bill, do you want to talk about the next post that's going to be coming out later tonight that we want them to share?
Yeah, I'm working on another one all about that. The fact that the sanitation tunnel in LA, which is exactly the same, is still not working. So it's been a year, and it's all about really, ultimately, what does Governor Whitmer want to be remembered for? Does she want to be the one that ran on the Great Lakes and then did nothing to prevent this pending disaster? So that's hopefully going to be posted tonight, and we can share a link for you tomorrow after it gets posted, so that you can all help to get it out there.
Thank you. All right. And just to wrap up, just thanks everybody for joining us this evening. Our next campaign briefing will be Tuesday, August 11th at 7:00. It's what comes next. So we'll have the Eagle permitting decision and the Michigan Supreme Court decisions by then. So we'll have a lot to talk about. In the meantime, keep sharing things on social media, making noise, keep pressure on Governor Whitmer. And thank you for being here in the fight to shut down Line 5. Have a good night.